everyone. Today I'm going to talk to you about a topic you've almost certainly had an interaction with every day, probably at least every week. Something you probably interacted with at least in the last month. And that topic is misinformation. And I want to start out by asking you a question, which is, how often have you walked into a room, listened to the conversations going on, and realized that the person who's talking doesn't know what they're talking about and thinks they're right? And that's kind of the crux of the topic I'm going to talk about, which is not even necessarily people lying, but people being misinformed or having misinformation. And the point I'm going to try to get across is that misinformation is very prevalent still in today's society, because you would think probably with the internet that it would become less, but as I'm about to go over, it has actually increased. And not only that, but it causes real harm today. So it's not just people, spouting off about the wrong cat facts, but it's something that causes real people harm and damages people's livelihood. And so where I want to start is that misinformation is a problem that most people deal with today. And I want to prove this by talking about an article from Blackwell, which is something that I found very interesting, and I've been misinformed about my whole life, which is that hot water is not actually good when you wash your hands. When you're washing your hands, you shouldn't actually wash your hands in hot water, because it doesn't help it at all, and all it does is cause hand irritation. And this was something that I didn't know, and it took me, I've been washing my hands with hot water my whole life. I feel like when I wash my hands with cold water, I'm not actually washing my hands. And this was kind of realization, and this is something that, is so basic and it's taught to kids, but is actually, a form of misinformation. And it's not that the people who are spreading it think that, I'm going to really trick this guy by telling him to wash his hands with hot water, haha, got him. It's more of I think this is what's right, and that's what makes it so harmful. And there's actually no known data today that suggests that washing with hot water is better in any way than washing with cold water. And, this is just an example of how prevalent it is, and now I kind of want to talk about how harmful it is. So, even notwithstanding people who, they learn a bad piece of information at a job, and that job causes them to get injured or even sometimes lose their life. There's an article from CNET that talks about how, people get injured and very often from just basic misinformation, basic mishandled job training with things like forklift, things like power tools, and these cause these problems that end up with people getting killed or injured. And this can also go into things like conspiracy theories, where there's another article from CNET that talks about how that 5G has caused multiple telephone workers to be threatened, and even a couple of them have gotten injured because people have harassed them so much over the 5G theory that it causes them to get violent and hurt their cars and hurt their places of work and threaten them multiple times. They had 20 individual cases where people got threatened. And I found this interesting because it's not people hearing misinformation and then doing something. It's hearing misinformation and then going out and actively causing a problem, causing an issue. And this is also shown in my other example for misinformation, which is that multiple doctors have had problems with COVID misinformation, where they'll talk to someone. Like there was a doctor in London who talked to a woman, and she said that she had the symptoms of a heart attack. She called into the doctor's office. She had the symptoms of a heart attack. He said, "Okay, we can come by." And she said, "No, I'm scared if I go into the hospital, I'll get COVID and die." And so he tried to convince her for 30 minutes, like, "Hey, we should send an ambulance by, pick you up because you sound like you're having a heart attack and might die." And she refused, and he had to listen, and he had to do his doctorly duty and refuse service. And this happened with another guy, with another doctor from Nepal, Duncan Maru, who had to stop multiple patients from drinking disinfectants because they read online that this was the way to solve this issue. And so this misinformation causes real harm today. And so, kind of in conclusion, I just wanted to educate about the prevalence and harm of misinformation, and even in today's society with as much information as we have. We talked about a couple things today, how, learning something bad at your job can cause you an issue, like it can, workplace safety issues, and we talked about how even in medical offices they have to deal with this very often. And people are getting harassed still today with this, bad information. And kind of in conclusion, misinformation has plagued us for all of history, and it's not lessened over time. And when you're reading online, you have to really keep in mind where you're getting your information from, and just know that even your most trusted Facebook groups may be rife with misinformation.